She's firing over 100 NSA employees because they were using an intelligence platform to chat about their sexual fantasies. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken. Okay, Stephanie. So you and I kind of already talked about this offline, but I got to bring this up because it's just it was kind of an eye-opening thing for me in terms of the fact that we've been so excited about the Trump administration, and just I feel like the tone of our podcast has shifted in a positive direction where we're always laughing and we're having a good time and we just can't wait for the next announcement to be made. And like, it's amazing, right? It's like the golden age. It's incredible. Yep. But not everybody feels that way. And it's one thing when we talk about stuff that, we read with the leftist meltdowns and, people just having Trump derangement syndrome. And we've talked about this briefly in the past. Like, my family is incredibly liberal, with the exception of myself, my husband, and my mom. The rest of my family is like far left.
Like typical California people.
Yeah, except they're not even California. They live in Utah.
Oh.
And they, this goes back to they were huge Hillary supporters and Obama supporters and just absolutely loved Biden. And when COVID happened, it kind of fucked up our family because we had very differing beliefs on that. One of my closest relatives that practically raised me after my dad passed no longer talks to me, hasn't spoken to me since COVID. I have a very tenuous relationship with my aunt, and I have a decent relationship with my cousin because we kind of try to keep, politics out of our conversation for the most part. But she sends me a text a couple days ago, I think it was Monday, and she basically told me, like, you need to stay in Europe as long as you can because it's a fucking nightmare in the States. And I said, like, why? What do you mean? And she said, one big problem is fucking Elon Musk. And I'm like, okay, why do you think he's a problem? And she went off and on this tangent about how the government is getting dismantled to the point that everyone is at risk. And she said she would not fly in an airplane until this is resolved. And now, granted, she works for the federal government. So her perspective, she has a very personal attachment to what's going on. And she's saying that this is like an all-out war on federal employees and just like this laundry list of everything that's wrong. And I don't think she listens to the podcast, or she probably wouldn't have texted me any of this in the first place.
Unless she was trying to start something.
Right. We clearly have very differing opinions. And I just said, I think our perspectives are different. I don't believe it's an all-out war on federal employees as much as it's just cleaning house and getting rid of corruption. And, I brought up that this is not unique to Trump. Every administration has made changes when they come into the White House. And, my opinion is our system's broken and needs to be fixed. And she was not having it. And she's like, this isn't cleaning house. This is, irresponsible and illegal and unconstitutional. And it has to do with corruption and, calling Trump our felon president. And Elon Musk is Trump's Nazi henchman. And she likened it to, Orwell's 1984 and said it was terrifying. And it was just like kind of how we described the Biden administration.
Yes, that was totally our perspective. It was like doom and gloom, like the world is ending kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it was just, I didn't really engage. I tried to keep it, just, hey, we have a different opinion. It's probably best if we don't talk about this. Because she's like, you have no idea what's going on here. And I said, no, I'm actually very well versed in what's going on in the United States right now. And, she's taking this as a personal attack on her family and a personal threat. And, she's like, I'm going to move to California where my ethics and beliefs and values are aligned. And I'm like, You know what? I think that's a really good idea. You probably should.
If only they would all move to California and they could have King Newsom reign over them and, live in
Seriously.
their dystopian nightmare.
My husband and I had this conversation over the weekend. We were at the grocery store and we were talking about this issue with my cousin. And I said, I think they need to pick a coast. Like, we'll give
Yeah.
them a choice. Do you want the West Coast or the East Coast? But you have to
Hmm.
pick one. And then all of you need to move there. And he's like,
Yeah.
well, how would you regulate that? And I said, you give them a 5-year plan. Like, you have 5 years to transition to this side of the country. And if you don't, that's your choice. But then you'll be subject to the rules and laws and regulations of a, common sense America. And I could go off on a tangent on this whole thing about my plans for the country. But this was such a reminder that, like, wow, we think what's happening is so amazing. And, other people really don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you watch the news, they'll have you think that everything, like the world is ending, So if that's where she's getting her information, but it's like, where were you when people were losing their federal jobs because they wouldn't get the COVID vaccine?
Right.
How is that completely okay and justified, but this isn't? It's like the hypocrisy again, but they don't see it that way. And I mean, I think we get in our bubble, but even on TikTok, where there used to be like so many outspoken liberal people, there's more and more people that are saying like, you know what, this is good. Like we're kind of seeing how things are corrupt. And there's a lot of federal employees posting and complaining about losing their jobs. And the whole entire comment section is people saying, yeah, that sucks. We deal with that all the time in the real world. So it's
Mhm.
like, I guess she's still in her bubble, which I kind of feel bad for that. But what are you gonna
I
do?
do too, and you can't, there's no trying to reason or logic or present
Yes,
any other point of view. It's pointless.
it's like trying to
So,
reason with a toddler. They're
yeah,
gonna throw a temper
right.
tantrum. Like just walk away, let them get it all out,
Yeah,
and you can be friends after.
right, exactly. So,
But okay, speaking of liberal tears, Joy Reid was fired from MSNBC, which, sometimes I question myself. I'm like, I like to think I'm a good person, but then like I was so fucking happy about this, which is really nasty, but she was a nasty, hateful person. Like she was bad. And like I would say out of all of the reporters and news anchors, she probably shouted and cried the loudest. And
Mhm.
I feel like this is just further confirmation that the extreme left is just not appealing to the majority of Americans anymore.
Oh yeah, and she played the victim with this.
Of
And I think,
course.
oh yeah, and her last episode, she was talking about the crisis of democracy and how we're in the throes of fascism now. And she didn't mention Trump by name, but it was very obvious that that's what she was talking about. And she was saying, like, she did this interview with a podcast where she talked about her rage and her sadness and but
They
all
do
of
have a
all of
lot of
this.
rage.
Yeah, right. And how it was so wrong that she was fired, and but that her messages are coming from God. So her basically saying that Trump is a fascist is a message from God, not from her. But the next person they need to get rid of is fucking Rachel Maddow because she is just as bad.
I heard Megyn Kelly was talking about her and saying how whatever she works maybe one day a week and still gets paid $30 million or something. I'm like, are you kidding me? Where
Well,
can I
that's
sign up for
funny.
that job?
Trump mentioned that too because, after Joy Reid was fired, he posted one of his classic Trump rants on Truth Social. And I have to read it because that's exactly what he said. And of course, he uses his, Trumpisms to basically bring down everybody. So he said, quote, low life chairman of Concast instead of Comcast, Brian Roberts, the owner of ratings challenged and MSNBC has finally gotten the nerve to fire one of the least talented people in television, the mentally obnoxious racist Joy Reid. Based on her ratings, which were virtually non existent, she should have been canned long ago, along with everyone else who works there. Also thrown out was Alex Wagner, the sub on the seriously failing Rachel Maddow show. Rachel rarely shows up because she knows there's nobody watching, and she also knows that she's got less television persona than virtually anyone on television, except perhaps Joy Reid. Then there's, of course, the low IQ con man, Al Sharpton, who has perhaps the lowest ratings in the history of television. What is he doing to Brian Roberts to stay on the air? The whole corrupt operation is nothing more than an illegal arm of the Democrat Party. They should be forced to pay vast sums of money for the damage they've done to our country. Fake news is an unpardonable sin.
Ooh, that's got to be a new line we use. Unpardonable sin. I love that. He is like so funny. So this is totally going to blow up on TikTok because whenever he does these, people will like do these videos based off of that movie Mean Girls, and they're like, Trump is so a mean girl. Like, because he just is so funny. But I mean, Rachel Maddow, I'm trying to remember what exactly she said, but I think she was being sued, and I'm not sure if the case settled for, just spewing lies about, probably about Trump. And that's got to cost the news network a shit ton of money. So I don't know why she's still around, but thank God Joy Reid is gone. And
Yep.
I think they're giving, what's her, the redhead that was the White House,
Yes, yes.
Jen
They gave
Psaki.
her, yeah, they gave her like a prime time slot or something now
You
because
know
of
what though?
this.
I could deal with her a lot more than Joy Reid, but she's kind of annoying too. So
I was surprised Trump didn't mention her in that post.
yeah, I know. That's kind of weird. Well, speaking of fake news outlets, I have to play my favorite clip of the week from Caroline Levitt because she's just fucking awesome. And she's responding to the fake news outlet AP's lawsuit against her. This is what she had to say. Hang on, let me start that over. Hang on, my phone's giving me issues. Okay.
Federal judge denied the Associated Press's emergency motion for a temporary restraining order against myself, our Deputy Chief of Staff Taylor Budowich, and our Chief of Staff Susie Wiles for our decision to remove the Associated Press from the White House press pool for certain and special events. The judge's ruling upholding our decision to deny the Associated Press such privileged access reinforces the truth. And it reiterates what I said from this podium last week when that suit was filed. Asking the President of the United States questions in limited spaces, such as the Oval Office and Air Force One, is a privilege that unfortunately has only been granted to a few. It is not a legal right for all. Federal judge did.
I mean, I just think it's so ridiculous that they get kicked out of the Oval Office, which only a few reporters are allowed in there, and they sue them. It's like what a bunch of entitled brats throwing a temper tantrum.
Oh, she went beyond that because they there when she continues talking in that clip, she announced that the White House team is now going to be making decisions on which outlets get to take part in press events. And it was
Ooh.
all because of this whole thing with banning the Associated Press. And she said, quote, I'm proud to announce that we're going to give the power back to the people who read your papers, watch your television shows, and who listen to your radio stations. Moving forward, the White House press pool will be determined by the White House press team. Legacy outlets who have participated in the press pool for decades will still be allowed to join, fear not, but we will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who've never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility. Just like we added a new media seat in this briefing room, legacy media outlets who have been here for years will still participate in the pool, but new voices are going to be welcomed in as well. As part of these changes, we will continue the rotation amongst the 5 major television networks to ensure the president's remarks are heard far and wide around this world. We will add additional streaming services which reach different audiences than traditional cable and broadcast. So I think that's incredibly awesome.
It's amazing. And when you look at the numbers, because I know there's going to be people saying, well, that's not fair. No, if you look at the numbers, these mainstream news networks are lucky if they get a few 100,000 people tuning in. And we've seen throughout the campaigning that these podcasts will get millions of people tuning in. So they need to put the news where the people are. And that has shifted over to, different things like streaming platforms and podcasts and away from the dinosaur, legacy MSM.
Well, they are not happy about it because
Of
there's an
course.
association called the White House Correspondents Association, and they are apparently said they were blindsided about this announcement. So I want to read this post from the president of the WHCA, Eugene Daniels. And he said, quote, "This move tears at the independence of a free press in the United States. It suggests government will choose the journalists who cover the president. In a free country, leaders must not be able to choose their own press corps. For generations, the working journalists elected to lead the White House Correspondents Association Board have consistently expanded the WHCA's membership and its pool rotations to facilitate the inclusion of new and emerging outlets. Since its founding in 1914, the WHCA has sought to ensure that reporters, photographers, producers, and technicians who actually do the work 365 days every year decide amongst themselves how these rotations are operated so as to ensure consistent professional standards and fairness in access on behalf of all readers, viewers, and listeners. To be clear, the White House did not give the WHCA board a heads up or have any discussion about today's announcements, but the WHCA will never stop advocating for comprehensive access, full transparency, and the right of the American public to read, listen to, and watch reports from the White House delivered without fear or favor."
Hey, asshole, let's not forget it was Joe Biden that decided to bring TikTok influencers to the White House and have personal meetings with them. And it was Kamala Harris that decided to go on a brat summer campaign on TikTok as well and bring in like celebrity influencers instead of actually talking to the people. So they set that precedent, not Trump.
No, and I just think it's like, okay, you're whining and crying, but you are the outlets that are basically spouting fake news.
Yeah.
So get the fuck out.
Right, exactly. It's like, it's so absolutely ridiculous. They're just, throwing a temper tantrum, basically. Like, you think suing the White House press secretary is going to do you any favors? How
Right.
fucking stupid. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Well, speaking of shakeups, we have to give an update on the Elon email scandal because I still find this totally entertaining. And if you missed our episode on Monday, we were talking about how overblown the ridiculous reaction was from the MSM and the left about the email that Elon sent to federal employees on Friday, giving them something like 48 hours, or maybe it was even longer. It was like till Monday night to send their 5 bullet point list of things they did at work last week. And if they didn't respond, it would be considered resignation. Well, like I said, the reaction to this whole thing was blown out of proportion. And Elon later ended up posting on X and saying it was a pulse check to see if federal employees actually check their emails. And I didn't see this when we talked about it on Monday, but he also had written, quote, "A lot of people in for a rude awakening and a strong dose of reality. They don't get it yet, but they will." So, of course, several senior government officials didn't think this was amusing, and there was a lot of backlash posted online. But Elon gave the best response yesterday because he went back on X and he said, quote, "The email request was utterly trivial, as the standard for passing the test was to type some words and press send. Yet so many failed even that inane test, urged on in some cases by their managers. Have you ever witnessed such incompetence and contempt for how your taxes are being spent? Makes old Twitter look good. Didn't think that was possible," end quote. And then he indicated that he's going to extend the deadline for the email response. And he said, quote, subject to the discretion of the president, they will be given another chance. Failure to respond a second time will result in I think I wrote that wrong. I said determination. I don't think
Termination.
that's right.
Termination.
Termination. I'm like,
Not
determination. I don't
determination,
think
the
so. Yeah,
opposite.
will result in termination. And I just think this whole situation is comical.
It truly is. And it's so funny because whenever Trump's asked about it, he kind of has that smirk on his face where he's like trying to be serious, but he's just like laughing on the inside. But okay, I came across because there's this trend now on TikTok where like federal employees are reading the email and like wanting sympathy, even though everyone in the comments is like, stop, just do your damn job. So there's this one girl, she does a TikTok, and I mean, she looks like your typical left wing, like liberal type. And she reads the email and she's like, so I actually already sent my 5 bullet points. In fact, I sent 10. She's like, I do this every week. I like to show my manager what I'm doing to be productive. And just a tip for all the federal employees out there, you should be proud of your work and you should want to be productive and you should want to keep your manager in the loop. And she's like, this isn't hard, guys. Just do the damn 5 bullet points. You're not doing yourself any favors. And if you don't do it, you're not going to be around much longer. And I was like, I wish I could give her a big hug because I'm like, thank you. This is a simple task. And maybe if they hear it from a liberal girl, maybe they'll be more willing to put in the effort. But it's like, if you can't send a simple email, then what signal does that send to not just your manager, but the entire administration? It says you're not going to put the least amount of effort into your job or into this administration. So why the hell do you think you should keep your job with all of these benefits and all these vacation days when there's someone else that'll come in and be happy to give a list of 50 bullet points of what they're doing,
Mhm.
And then all of these people, they're crying, well, Elon Musk is not my boss. He's not my manager. That is like a kid going to school, and when asked to sit down and do their work, they tell their teacher, you're not my mom. I don't have to listen to you. I relate everything to kids because, I've got young kids, but that's what it reminds me of. I'm like, this is so immature. It's so unprofessional. And again, Elon Musk is a genius, and this is a genius move to weed out the weak links that, aren't going to go along with anything that their supervisor or anyone from this administration says. And I love that Trump and Elon are just having fun with it and kind of like making the media look like idiots for continuing to call this a constitutional crisis. But okay, listen to this. This is freaking wild. Okay. So Tulsi Gabbard is in. She's in her role, Director of National Intelligence. And she said that already she's firing over 100 NSA employees because they were using an intelligence platform, like a secure platform that's used for work to chat about their sexual fantasies.
I saw this.
Yes. And
Oh
I
my
heard more
God.
about it this morning on the Morning Wire, and it was like fucked up. Like they were saying their sexual fantasies were like about cutting off genitals and having like gender transition surgeries and like really like messed up stuff. What's even more messed up is their managers were not only they didn't know only know about it, they were encouraging it. This was all under the whole DEI and we need to create like safe spaces. So they were encouraging this to happen. Then these employees started attacking conservatives and like calling out people like Ben Shapiro and just saying really horrendous things. And again, this is on an NSA like site that you're supposed to use to communicate securely with your coworkers, not to gossip about weird, kinky, fetishes that you did. So she was just saying this is unprofessional, obviously. And the fact that they did it so brazenly, like they didn't even try to hide it or cover it up or anything, because they've never been held accountable for anything like this before. And, obviously anyone on the outside of the federal government looks at this and is like, well, yeah, obviously fire them all. But I'm sure the left is going to say how this is unconstitutional or something. But she mentioned she's just scratched the surface. Like she's just started her role and already they found this right there for everyone to see. So just imagine what they're going to find when she actually starts digging in a little bit further. It's going to be a shit show, I'm sure.
Yeah, we are literally at the tip of the iceberg with this stuff.
Yeah.
And all those people need to be fired. They really do. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, I think if they actually followed through on firing everyone that was doing complete nonsense during the Biden admin, I don't even think there would be any government employees left. Maybe like a handful.
Well, you know what's interesting is remember during the Biden administration how unemployment looked great and they kept saying, "Oh, the economy's great because we have all these jobs." Well, that's because he kept adding government jobs. He added like hundreds of thousands of government jobs that were just nonsense jobs. So now they're basically just getting rid of the jobs that never should have been there in the first place. The only reason they were put there was so they could say, "Oh, see, we're doing great things for the economy. We're creating all these jobs," when really they were all fake jobs.
Yeah, it's a complete facade.
Yeah.
And then the other story that came out yesterday that's getting a lot of media attention. Tell me if you saw this. 21 Doge workers wrote a joint resignation letter that they sent to White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. And
I
the
did
letter,
not
I'm
see
going to read.
this.
Okay, this is great. I'm going to read part of the letter because it said, quote, "We swore to serve the American people and uphold our oath to the Constitution across presidential administrations. However, it has become clear that we can no longer honor these commitments at the United States Doge Service. We will not use our skills as technologists to compromise core government systems, jeopardize Americans' sensitive data, or dismantle critical public services. We will not lend our expertise to carry out or legitimize Doge's actions," end quote. So, of course, the MSM is making this look like these are Doge employees that Elon hired, and they're now revolting and turning against him because he's so corrupt and dangerous. And I swear, just go look at all the headlines. This is the theme of every headline in the MSM. But the truth is, these 21 quote Doge staffers are actually existing civil service employees from the United States Digital Service that was created in 2014 under the Obama administration, and their whole purpose was to streamline digital services on federal websites. And this department of like approximately 100 people got absorbed into Doge, and they were given the task of helping with this cost cutting and investigations into government efficiency. So once again, here's the false propaganda being spread by the MSM to try and create division and say, that the Doge employees are turning against Elon. And so, of course, he responded and he posted on X and he called it, more fake news from the Associated Propaganda, which meaning the Associated Press, because they were the first ones to break this story. And he said, quote, "These are Dem political holdovers who refuse to return to the office. They would have been fired had they not resigned."
This is what I love about the way things have shifted. Everyone is seeing that post. Like
Mhm.
most people are not tuning into the MSM, but think about how much worse it's going to get with this fake news because they know they're going to lose all their funding and they're kicked out of the Oval Office. Like they're going to do whatever it takes to try to tear down Trump and Elon as much as possible. It's just annoying.
Yeah. And I just love that it's almost like having just between Trump and Elon with their Truth Social and X posts, this is the most entertaining administration that I've ever seen. So,
I
but we
know.
got we got to switch gears for a minute and talk about Ukraine, because you know how we were talking the other day about, whether Zelensky should be staying in power and how they need to hold an election. And I think I said this on the podcast, maybe not. But what a lot of people that I've talked to here in Europe, they're like, no, Ukrainians love Zelensky. And you're getting fake news in the United States, and the people love him and he's very popular. Well, according to a vote that took place at a special session of the Ukrainian parliament on Monday, the answer to that is actually no. So they held this special session to commemorate this being the third 3 years since the war started, which is again insane. And there's these, recent claims by Russia and the United States that Zelensky is not a legitimate president because his term technically expired last May. And so the parliament convened on Monday, and the whole purpose was to vote on a resolution that was supposed to be like a symbolic show of support for Zelensky. But it seems to me like this totally backfired because the resolution did not get enough votes to pass. And according to DPA International, the resolution received 218 votes, and the minimum required to pass it was 226 votes. And what I found interesting was a lot of members of Zelensky's own party abstained from voting. So in total, there were 54 members of parliament who did not vote, and 38 of those 54 were representatives from Zelensky's Servant of the People party.
Okay, that's actually really shocking because Zelensky, I mean, he's been known to jail anyone that opposes him. So, I mean, these guys have some balls to do that, but I'm glad that they did. And yeah, like there's a lot that's moving very quickly in Europe and with Ukraine. So remember when JD Vance went to Munich? I think that was last week now. It feels like a year ago because things are happening so
No.
fast. But he told the European leaders, the US is done footing the bill for your defense. You start defending yourself. And so then French President Emmanuel Macron like held that private meeting in Paris with European leaders without the US. And, people were like, oh, well, they'll just create a new NATO type alliance and everything like that. Well, apparently that meeting didn't go well because Macron visited Trump at the White House and he is like completely singing a different tune. He was pretty much kissing Trump's ass. And the two seemed friendlier than ever, which Macron's been very outspoken and like calling Trump names and everything like that. But he was all smiles, and he said that Europe is willing to step up and do more for defense and security, and that he and the other European leaders are willing to send their troops to Ukraine as peacekeepers once the peace deal is done, and just completely going along with everything Trump has been saying. And so then President Trump said that he asked Putin specifically about this, about having European troops in Ukraine as peacekeepers, and he said he's fine with that. Trump also said that Ukraine needs to pay us back for funding hundreds of billions of dollars in their war. And to do that, he wants access to the country's vast oil and mineral reserves, plus a cut of revenue from future energy deals in Ukraine. He is like the best freaking negotiator. So Zelensky in the beginning was completely against this. Like, that's never going to happen. Now he's going along with it all of a sudden. Imagine that. Maybe his vote in his parliament had something to do with that. So, anyhow, Trump said Zelensky's coming to the US on Friday, from what he understands, and he's going to sign a rare earths material deal. And he was vague about the details, but then he said it could be $1 trillion deal. So, like, that's completely shifted. In like a week's time, all these European leaders and Zelensky went from being totally against Trump to just going along with him and smiling and everything, which I think is kind of weird. I'm a little cautious of that. But I think it's a
I
good
think
a good sign, right?
I think so, and I hope that it does go well because again, everything I'm seeing here in Europe is no, Zelensky is not going to do this rare earth mineral deal with Trump, and everything that you're seeing about that is false. So I can't wait to see what actually happens on Friday.
It'll be interesting. I think he was against it until, I'm guessing that vote that you talked about maybe changed his mind. Like maybe he sees the writing on the wall. I don't know. But I have to bring this up just because we were talking about the French president. And I don't know if you've seen this, Tara, but like it's all over TikTok. This is like the biggest trending story because Candace Owens is doing this documentary. It's like a whole series on Macron's wife, Brigitte. And I mean, she goes into detail and brings all the receipts, all the evidence that Macron's wife is actually a biological man, and not just any man, but Macron's father.
What?
Yeah, like I mean, hearing that, it's like, that sounds crazy, but she brings all of this like compelling evidence. And so people on TikTok are all talking about that. Everyone's talking about this. People are bringing up a really interesting point. They're saying, if this was all bullshit, then why hasn't Macron sued Candace Owens? Why hasn't he brought any evidence of the contrary to what she's saying? And so the thing is, like, his attorney did send Candace Owens letters, but none of the letters dispute that Brigitte's a man or his father. They just dispute like random facts. Like, well, on that date, she, didn't work here. And oh, she used this word, but that's a vague term. But not any evidence on the actual point that Brigitte Macron could be a biological male. So
Or
people
his
are like, oh my
father.
God, I think it's true. Yes.
Oh my
And
God.
then there was some kind of event where Brigitte came out and she announced that Emmanuel Macron wouldn't be there because he's dealing with mental health issues right now. And it's just like the whole thing is like, what the fuck? And you would think like there's no way. There's no way. But with everything the left has pushed with this whole gender reassignment agenda, it doesn't really surprise me that there's something this crazy going on in politics.
Plus, Candace Owens, I see her as being a very rational, like investigative journalist. She's not
Oh, yeah.
like just a social media, you know, conspiracy theory person. She's
She's
like
researched
legitimate.
this for
Yeah.
like a year and a half,
Wow.
and she let them know because she wanted their input, like in the documentary. And they told her, Macron told her, do not post it, and kind of like threatened her. But again, no legal action over the basis of what she's talking about. So it's like, you would think he would just come out and be like, here's the evidence, like she's a woman, but he didn't, which makes me think, well, then it must be true what she's saying. And she's said many times on the podcast, show me the proof and I will shut up. I promise you, like, I will shut up. Just give me any proof you have. They're giving nothing.
I just can't get past the father part.
Yes, I know, but it's like sick and twisted. Like, I haven't listened to all of it. I've just kind of picked up clips here and there, but he was kind of raised by his grandma, but she would read him like these perverted books. And it just sounded like the whole thing is just perverted. So I don't know.
Now I'm gonna have to deep dive into her show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The whole series. You can't miss it. Uh, but anyhow, also in Europe, you had mentioned, I think it was on the last episode, about the party that won in Germany and how, they're supposed to be moderate right, yet the chancellor like hates Trump. So I just wanted to look into him a little bit because I don't know anything about the guy. His name's Frederick Merz or Frederic, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But he was actually chairman of the board of BlackRock in Germany. And he's already having talks with the World Economic Forum. So, I think this guy's bad news. Those seem like some red flags. And just like here in the US, probably the biggest issue during this election was the open border. And he just came out and publicly announced that he's not closing the border. He's keeping it wide open. And so people are like, what the hell? It certainly doesn't seem like they were expecting that from a party that's more right leaning. So, yeah, a lot of red flags, and I feel like Germany's screwed.
Okay, I gotta look into this now too. That's really interesting because I know that the border is been a big focus with German politics. But speaking of the border, I've got to ask if you've seen this because Politico is reporting that military contractors like Blackwater, they want to help Trump with deporting illegal migrants. So apparently, Blackwater CEO Eric Prince has pitched a 26-page proposal to Trump that would involve carrying out mass deportations through, quote, a network of processing camps on military bases, a private fleet of 100 planes, and a small army of private citizens empowered to make arrests, end quote. And the price for this plan would be $25 billion, and the goal would be to deport 12 million people before the 2026 midterms. And the document apparently goes into details on why using Blackwater would be beneficial. And it talks about how deporting this many people would require the government to get rid of nearly 500,000 illegal aliens per month. And that to keep pace with Trump's deportations, this would require a 600% increase in activity. And it's unlikely that our government could, quote, swell its internal ranks to keep pace with this demand. And in order to process this enormous number of deportations, the government should enlist outside assistance. So Politico is also reporting that top White House officials are having conversations about this with military contractors. And even Steve Bannon recently commented on this, and he said that people want the immigration crisis solved quickly, and the government is typically slow to do things. And he said, quote, "It's smart to start bidding out right now and get a feel for what else outside companies and contractors can do," end quote. And I don't think Trump has publicly commented on this yet, but what do you think, Stephanie? Is this a good idea?
Well, okay, I'm going to say I think it's a good idea. Also saying that I have not looked into Blackwater specifically or the details of it. But the reason why I'm going to say I think it's a good idea is because I remember watching an interview where Tom Homan was being asked, like, hey, is it even physically possible for you to deport all these people who have entered illegally? Because at the current pace, it's not looking like it'll happen. And, that's when he was discussing some type of like monetary incentive to get people to voluntarily leave the country that are here illegally. And when he was asked about that, he said he was actually open to the idea because while it would be expensive, he said you can't put a price on our safety, and having unvetted people in our country puts us at great risk. So I agree with that. And just looking at the money that was spent on ridiculous DEI projects and how much has been going out the door to other countries like Ukraine, I feel like this would be something that would actually be worth the cost, in my opinion. And if you take the cost cutting from Doge combined with ending the money going to Ukraine, it would be paid for. If you just divert a portion of that money that went to Ukraine, it would be paid for. So I think it's feasible. And if it gets people out quickly, why not? Because it really doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that with everything we have in place right now.
No, and I feel like there's just so much legality that the left is going to use to try to block the Trump administration from even being able to carry out these deportations. But
Yeah.
if it's done by private companies, that's a different story.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is you have these crazy ass people that are posting pictures, phone numbers, and addresses of the people in the military or border patrol or whoever is going out, and they're like doxing them, so people go and terrorize them. So it's a big threat. It's a danger to the people, that are on Tom Homan's team. And yeah, if you can bring in an outside company where they can't as easily access those names, maybe that would be better. I don't know. But I think it's definitely worth talking about. I mean, whatever is going to help get the job done. But speaking of illegals, remember how we talked about that massive housing development that's outside of Houston called Colony Ridge?
Mhm.
So the Department of Homeland Security and the Texas Department of Public Safety have teamed up and they were investigating the development. They ended up doing a raid, which Tom Homan is calling just phase one. So that tells me more raids are coming. But this community is 60 miles wide and it's just been a haven for illegal migrants. And there's been all kinds of criminal activity just happening there. It's basically like martial law in this place. And so apparently, when they did the raid, there was a bust of 344 pounds of meth. There also was an illegal migrant that confessed to luring a woman into the development and murdering her. And, this got me thinking, how many women have been brutally murdered by illegals so far? And where the hell is the outrage from the left? They say they're all about protecting women and protecting women's rights, yet we don't hear a peep from them when there's these young, innocent women being raped and brutally murdered by people who shouldn't even be here in the first place. They say nothing. So I hope they
No,
catch them all.
I think someone does need to put out these statistics, and I'm actually surprised we haven't seen that yet,
Yeah.
especially from Congress. But remember how we were speculating on Monday about whether Dan Bongino was going to give up his podcast now that he's accepted the job as FBI deputy director?
Hmm.
And I know we both said like we really hope he won't stop the podcast, but in all reality, he's going to be really fucking busy, and that only makes sense. But I was going to play a short clip, but I want to play the whole clip because he talks about some of the stuff you just said and his reasons for why he accepted this position.
But I am going in this clear-eyed. Vision of President Trump, Attorney General Bondi, and Director Patel. I am going to do my job to implement that vision. And I can tell you right now, we are going to try our best. Every single thing I have in me, every single strand of DNA cell in my body is going to be dedicated towards keeping this homeland safe, no matter what. No matter what, that's my job. We're going to reestablish faith in this institution. The good people there doing their job, hitting the streets, developing sources. We'll have your back. We are going to reestablish faith in this institution. The FBI belongs to the American people. Doesn't belong to me. Doesn't belong to anyone else but the American people. But this is the honor of a lifetime, and it's a serious mission. And I plan on implementing that vision. Folks, there are a small number of people out there in the country right now dedicated to doing really bad things. It's not the overwhelming majority of Americans are patriots that love this country and love their family. They love their jobs. They go to work every day. But there are a small number of really bad people out there who are planning on really bad things, from terrorists to narco traffickers, child sex rings, gang members. I tell you right now, I'm not going to rest easy until we find as many of you as we can. Don't sleep. No, after today. But that's my mission. Folks, of course, the Constitution matters. We're going to get back to the four corners of that document that guide us all as well. And I think you know from my history of covering content here that the primacy of that is really important. You understand that? It is the one thing that dictates all the rest of your actions, and that's the Constitution. Again, regarding the show, folks, going forward, I will tell you how we're going to wind my portion of the show down. And I'm just going to leave you with this before I get to some other content. And we've got a couple more. We've got some shows for you lined up. So I actually put a show together, even though this has been harder than I thought. I didn't plan on this. I didn't plan on a lot of things. But I want you to know it is the honor of my lifetime. And I hope I'm making a plea to you all personally. I hope you're not angry or upset at me for making this decision. I knew it was the right thing to do, but there is a big cost, and I understand that. There's a chance when the mission's over that you guys all disappear and go somewhere else. Not going to lie to you, it's been on my mind for a long time. I hope not. I love you guys, but this is a mission I can't say no to.
I just love that.
I know. He's just like a good guy, you know?
I know. And I think he's going to do great things. And I'm super excited that he is a part of the FBI. But to switch gears once again, it looks like your governor DeSantis, Stephanie, he is starting his own version of Doge. And he gave a press conference on Monday and he said the funniest thing, which actually is true. He said Florida was Doge before Doge was cool. And I didn't realize this, but you guys have actually had a government efficiency task force in place since 2006. And he's taking it to another level because he announced a state Doge task force is being implemented to eliminate bureaucratic waste and bloat and modernize state government. And his goal is to eliminate 740 state government positions while also filling shortages in highway patrol and corrections. And he wants to get rid of 70 unnecessary boards and commissions that employ over 900 positions. But he said that'll probably require legislative action. But I was reading this article in the New York Sun that talked about how since DeSantis became governor in 2019, Florida has already paid down 41% of the state's debt, which is amazing, and increased the state's rainy day funds by 9.4 billion and eliminated 3.8 billion from its budget last year. And this is coming from a state that experiences hurricanes and natural disasters
And
on an
has no
annual
state
basis.
income tax.
Right. Yeah. And it's like this is such a far cry from what's happening in blue states like New York and California.
Yeah, it's funny because I posted the idea that DeSantis was floating about getting rid of property taxes or at least reducing them. And I put it on TikTok, and surprisingly, people hated it. And I don't know if I ended up on left-wing TikTok or what, but all the comments were saying Florida's going to go bankrupt. There's no way this is possible. And they were saying like, oh, they're going to have to mooch off of blue states. Yeah, since when has Florida ever mooched off of
What?
blue states? Instead, the blue state people are moving to Florida. Like, obviously, this is probably left TikTok. But anyhow,
Blue states don't have anything to give to Florida.
exactly. And so I don't think people understand what property taxes pay for. I am going to admit I didn't until I looked into it. It was very eye-opening, but you could go online and look up your county and see exactly what it pays for. So my county pays for, through property taxes, it pays for public local school districts, public transport, infrastructure, and other municipal government projects. Okay, that's it, first of all. So the public school system is horrible, which is why I'm pulling my kids out of school. I don't use public transport, nor do I even think we have it in my county, other than maybe like the public school buses. The infrastructure and government projects, what does that entail? That's where we need Doge because that's a huge red flag for like, corruption and these politician pet projects. And so I'm just shocked because I thought property taxes paid for way more, but I guess a lot of the stuff I thought it paid for actually comes from sales tax. And I don't know, that really surprised me, but we have a lot of people here. We have a huge tourism, you know, business going on where people are coming and they're spending money in our state. So we're getting money from people that don't even live here through sales tax. So I think that's why Florida is unique in what we're able to do in shifting around, money and maybe increasing the sales tax. I'd rather that than lose my home or an elderly person lose their home that's had their house paid off for 30 years but can't afford to keep up with the property taxes because the property taxes are outrageous because you have all these people moving from New York and it's driving up the cost of homes, which is driving up the cost of taxes, which is flooding our public school. Like it's crazy because all the blue states are fleeing to red states. So that's what's happening. So anyhow, I think it's great that he's starting the Doge thing. And I looked into it, and it's not just DeSantis. You have a whole bunch of states that have been talking about doing all sorts of things with property taxes, like Arizona, Georgia, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Virginia, Wyoming. I mean, these aren't just red states. And then Vivek, I guess, how he's running for governor of Ohio. Well, he's saying he's going to cut the state income tax and property taxes in Ohio if he's elected. And he says it's your money, not the government's. And he's also saying that he'll create a Doge team to cut all of the wasteful costs within the state. And he said, quote, "We're in the middle of a second industrial revolution right now. I believe deep in my bones that Ohio can lead the way again." And so this is where, you have high level thinkers like Vivek, DeSantis, Elon Musk, who see the big picture that the rest of us miss. If they eliminate property and income tax, which we don't have a state income tax in Florida, that makes your state incredibly attractive to businesses. And when Trump is working on bringing businesses and manufacturing back into the United States, where do you think they're going to go? They're going to go to states that don't have a state income tax and don't have a state property tax because that's going to save them a lot of money. And so when these businesses are coming into your state, that brings jobs, people, resources to that state. And so, you know, I just think that it's definitely feasible, but I think most people don't really understand property taxes compared to sales tax and are just looking at this as a huge negative. And I think DeSantis and Vivek and all these guys could do a better job of explaining to the average person why this would be beneficial and why they're not going to get screwed elsewhere if they implement this. So I don't know, but it's just funny because it's like you look at Florida that doesn't have state income tax, and like you said, they have a surplus. You look at places like California and New York where there's astronomical taxes, and yet California is in a $26.7 billion deficit. That's according to Newsom. However, people are saying it's actually closer to 45 billion. Meanwhile, Florida has a surplus. So clearly there's a way if you weed out corruption to make your state work without taxing people crazy.
Yeah, and you mentioned like I think we talked about this a couple of days ago or last week that Texas is looking to do something similar. Not as good as the plan that DeSantis seems to have, but still better than nothing. But I think that like I would rather pay sales tax than property tax.
Well, yeah, because you can control what you
Right.
purchase. You can't
Mhm.
control that your property taxes are going up every single year by
Right.
sometimes thousands of dollars. And I
Mhm.
just feel so bad for people who are on a fixed income or lose their job or something and they've paid their mortgage, but they
Mhm.
can't afford, all this extra money for taxes. And that's what DeSantis is bringing up, that no one should have the right to basically take your home that's paid off for years because you missed 1 year of taxes.
Especially, and you can argue this with me, but especially if those taxes are going to the school system where these residents, like elderly residents, don't have children going to school.
Right.
So why should they be paying for the school system that they've already paid into when their kids were younger and their
Hmm.
kids are no longer in school? So I
Well, and
don't think they should be
especially
responsible for that.
we have school choice here. So you don't even have to send your kid to your local school. So it's like, but then you're still paying for that local school. And so it's just, I don't know, it's very interesting. And then the other thing people brought up is like, well, I rent, so I don't care. If you don't think that your landlord calculates taxes and the amount you pay in rent every month, you're an idiot. It
Mhm.
absolutely affects how much you pay. You're just not paying it directly. They're
Yeah.
putting it in your monthly rent. But I mean, that's like an argument people are making, and I'm just like, wow, okay, learn like just apply common sense for like 1 minute, please.
That would be, you should post that on TikTok. I want to see what people's
Oh
responses.
yeah, go to it. It's the post is taking off, and I was up so late last night responding to people because I was getting so pissed off. I'm like, are you stupid? Like, go, you can go and see what they pay for. It doesn't pay for that.
Yeah.
Like, I was getting so annoyed. I'm like, I need to get off of this for a while, but you go ahead, Tara. You can start responding to people.
Oh, I think I will. Okay. I'm going to switch gears again. I want to mention this story because you brought this up last week. And then I shit you not, this article comes across my feed last night and it totally confirmed what you were saying. Because you had mentioned how wealthy celebrities were taking advantage of the COVID grants. And like the information, you couldn't find the information because it was from a while back. Well, this just came out. Public records obtained by Business Insider show that the SBA, which is the Small Business Administration, there's this whole thing going on where It's over like $155 million in COVID relief grants that went to successful celebrities, and they're not going to try to recover any of it. So the article referenced millions in tax dollars that went to people like Lil Wayne, Marshmello, Chris Brown, Alice in Chains, and then a bunch of other celebrities and artists. And what did they spend the money on? Private jets, parties, luxury clothing, and multi-million dollar bonuses. And hardly any of that money went to staff salaries or benefits. And I remember you saying like, they were saying they needed this money to pay for their staff, which clearly did not get any of the money. So Senator Joni Ernst, she leads the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and she gave a statement this week and she said, quote, pandemic relief programs were designed to help small businesses keep their doors open and their employees afloat during an incredibly challenging time. Unfortunately, the more we learn, the more clear it is that taxpayers footed the bill for the extravagant lifestyles of the rich and famous. But get this, Stephanie, Congress decided that there's no wrongdoing here because when the grants were issued, Congress said they could legally be used for, quote, ordinary and necessary expenses. So apparently, while families were struggling to keep food on the table and getting their businesses shuttered and their lives completely upended, celebrities were getting paid millions of dollars in taxpayer money because apparently parties and private jets and luxury clothing are ordinary and necessary expenses.
Well, the Biden administration may have thought, oh, that's fine, but I guarantee Doge does not. And there's a new administration now.
It's a new sheriff in town. Yeah, but it gets even shadier. Okay. So the article talks about how these newly released records are showing that top officials for this program attended a briefing for congressional staff last December. And the SBA gave a presentation in this briefing, and it was completely redacted. And staff were warned not to talk about it. So they clearly knew they were giving out fraudulent money. And most of this grant staff has been laid off already. And Trump recently fired the SBA inspector general. But this shit like needs to be investigated further. And Senator Ernst, like, I hope she fucking goes full force with this because she said, the SBA has cloaked itself in secret and hid the full extent of its work from the American people for the last 4 years. I will be working with Kelly Loeffler and the Trump administration to bring full transparency to the agency and investigate just what on earth happened with taxpayers' money.
I mean, it's outrageous. These people that are already wealthy were just taking it all. I mean, doesn't surprise me. And it would explain why so many celebrities supported Kamala over Trump because they know they're screwed now that Trump's in there.
$155 million to celebrities. It's insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. But speaking of celebrities, so you know the whole P. Diddy case. Discovery was just turned over, which is all the, evidence they've collected. And one of the top attorneys, Anthony Rico, that's defending Diddy, just abruptly quit the case and said under no circumstances will he be returning. So I'm like, what was in that discovery file? It has to be really bad because just the stuff we've heard publicly was bad. But whatever he saw in there must have been really bad because this guy defended terrorists throughout his entire career. He has defended terrorists, but he won't defend Diddy. So, I mean, I can't wait to find out what's in that discovery.
Yeah, this thing is interesting to me all of this sudden. So, I mean, this Diddy case has been going on for a while, right?
Yeah.
And I don't pay attention. I don't really give a shit to most of the celebrity stuff. And I just kind of, whatever you've told me is what I see. And I've read a few articles, but I haven't gone down the rabbit hole until now because there's a documentary on Discovery and it's called The Fall of Diddy. And it's like a 5-part series. I'm on episode 2 right now. And I am fucking hooked. This thing goes back to like his childhood and how he came up in the industry and how this, abusive behavior and this violence has been.
Sorry, I had to pause the recording because someone was at the door and I don't know why. I didn't just leave it going. Sorry, Tara.
No, it's fine. What was I saying? Oh, his history of like abuse and violence like goes back to his childhood and shit like that. And it's really fascinating. And I just like I really didn't care about any of this before, but I didn't realize how far his reach went. Like in all avenues, not just the music industry, but like with fashion, with the elite community. I just didn't realize he was as big of a deal, I guess, as he is or was. And this shit is dark. It is really fucking dark. So, for those of you who like me were not really interested in this, I do suggest you watch this documentary on Discovery. Again, it's called The Fall of Diddy. And
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna,
dive into it. I
yeah,
want to dive into it, but then part of me is like a little scared because I know it's gonna be really bad,
I'm
hard to
surprised by
watch.
how many people are speaking out.
Yeah.
And I just they they must believe that he's going to be held accountable if this many people are speaking out, because most of the people they're interviewing are talking about how they've been silent for 15, 20 years out of fear and not wanting to say anything, and they interview a lot of people. So check it out, it's a great documentary. But while we're on the topic of evidence and celebrities, I don't know if you saw this, but a former FBI whistleblower named Garrett O'Boyle is alleging that the FBI and the deep state have been destroying evidence about Epstein and the Epstein client list and a bunch of other crimes against Americans. And this guy went on Benny Johnson's podcast on Monday, and he also talked to Michael Schellenberger, and he talked directly to Kash Patel. And he's saying that this is all being done by FBI employees, that they're deleting evidence from the agency's servers. And he was told that the way these files are being destroyed, like not even Elon Musk has the capability to restore them. And, it's like we were talking about the other day. I feel like even with how transparent the Trump administration is trying to be in revealing all of this corruption, I don't think we're going to know the full truth, because I'm sure the deep state started getting like destroying information the minute they knew Trump won the election. So they've had months to just, you know, get rid of everything. I do think there's going to be enough exposed to like throw the less important people under the bus like sacrificial lambs, but I think the true criminals are going to be protected.
Yeah. Well, Pam Bondi was asked because she has the Epstein file on her desk, and they asked, "Have you seen anything crazy yet?" or just something like that. And she said no. And that's the first thing I thought. Well, yeah, they've probably destroyed the evidence, just like the January 6th committee destroyed
Right.
all the evidence they had.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel like we're not going to get the level of accountability that there needs to be, but I guess it remains to be seen. And finally, I want to give an update on our shit show Congress, because it was the usual clown show chaos yesterday, with House Republicans narrowly passing a resolution. The vote was 217 to 215, and there were four Republican holdouts. Three were needed to pass the budget. And so, hours into this nonsense, GOP leaders ended up flipping Tim Burchett, Warren Davidson, and Victoria Spartz, who were three of the holdouts. But of course, the one rep who cannot be bought or swayed is always Thomas Massie, and he maintained his vote against it. And now we just begin the circus of the House resolution making its way to the Senate, and then seeing which plan gets pushed through at the 11th hour, as always. And I just wanted to point out, what is Trump's take on this? Well, he told reporters yesterday, quote, "I'm not involved in that. They know what I want," end quote. So I guess we'll keep you posted on the outcome.
Wow, he's being oddly mysterious. Yeah, good old Congress. Let the games begin, or the theater
Mhm.
performance begin.
Yeah,
All right. Well, man, that was a big update just for the middle of the week. Like,
I
are
know.
you kidding me? There's a lot happening. Well, we'll keep everyone updated on Friday with whatever else comes forward, because there will be a lot. But thank you guys for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your week.